My name is John Parker. I was born in a small town called Willowbrook. It's a quiet place with friendly people, surrounded by rolling hills and green fields. My parents, Tom and Mary Parker, were simple folks. My father worked as a carpenter, and my mother took care of the house. We didn't have much, but we had enough to get by. My earliest memories are of playing in the backyard with my little sister, Emily. She was 3 years younger than me, but we were inseparable. We'd spend hours chasing butterflies, climbing trees, and pretending to be explorers in the wilderness. That was our small garden. Life was simple back then, and we didn't have any worries. I started school when I was 6. The school was a short walk from our house, just across the town square. I remember feeling nervous on my first day, clutching my mother's hand as we approached the big, brick building. Inside, the walls were decorated with colorful drawings made by other children. My teacher, Mrs. Thompson, was a kind woman with a gentle smile. She welcomed me with open arms and helped me feel at ease. School was a whole new world for me. I was a curious child, always eager to learn new things. I loved reading, especially stories about adventure and far-off lands. Books were my escape, a way to explore places I could only dream of visiting. My favorite story was about a brave knight who traveled the world, saving people and fighting dragons. I often imagined myself in his shoes, riding a horse through enchanted forests and battling fierce creatures. At home, life was good. My father was a hard worker, but he always made time for us. He taught me how to use tools and build things. I'd watch him work in his workshop, fascinated by how he could turn a piece of wood into something beautiful. My mother was the heart of our home, always making sure we were fed and happy. She had a way of making everything better, whether it was a scraped knee or a bad day at school. As I grew older, I started to dream about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I thought about becoming a doctor, a teacher, or even a firefighter. But deep down, I knew I wanted to be like my father. I wanted to work with my hands, creating things that would last. I admired the way he took pride in his work, the way he could make something out of nothing. My sister, Emily, had different dreams. She was always singing and dancing, her laughter filling the house. She wanted to be a singer, to stand on a stage and have people clap for her. I used to tease her about it, but deep down I knew she had talent. Even at a young age, her voice was beautiful, and I believed she could achieve her dreams if she tried hard enough. Life in Willowbrook was peaceful. The seasons came and went, each one bringing its own joys. In the summer, we'd have picnics by the river, the warm sun shining down on us as we played in the water. Autumn was my favorite time of year. The leaves would turn golden and red, and the air would be crisp and cool. We'd rake up the fallen leaves into big piles and jump into them, laughing as we scattered them everywhere. Winter brought snow, and with it, the excitement of building snowmen and having snowball fights. My father would build a fire in the fireplace, and we'd gather around it, sipping hot chocolate and listening to him tell stories about when he was a boy. He'd talk about the old days, when life was harder but simpler, and how he learned to work with his hands from his own father. Spring was a time of renewal. The flowers would bloom, and the world would come alive again. My mother loved gardening, and she'd spend hours tending to her flowers, teaching Emily and me how to plant seeds and care for them. We'd watch as the tiny sprouts grew into beautiful flowers, their colors brightening our yard. Looking back, those early years were the happiest of my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was surrounded by love and security. I had everything a child could want: a loving family, a safe home, and dreams for the future. But as I grew older, I began to realize that life wasn't always as simple as it seemed. The first hint of this came when I was about 10 years old. My father started coming home later and later from work. He looked tired, and there was a worry in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. I didn't understand what was happening, but I could tell something was wrong. My mother tried to reassure us, saying that everything was fine, but I could hear the tension in her voice. One evening, after dinner, my father sat me down and told me that the company he worked for was struggling. They were cutting back on jobs, and he wasn't sure if he would be able to keep his. I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I could see how much it was affecting him. He told me not to worry, that he would find a way to take care of us, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. That was the first time I realized that life wasn't always easy. Up until then, everything had been so simple and carefree. But now, I started to see the cracks in the world around me. My father was worried about losing his job, and that meant things might change for us. I didn't know what to do with that knowledge, so I tried to push it away and focus on the things that made me happy. But as much as I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, and I was right. As the months passed, my father's worries became more apparent. His company eventually let him go, along with many others. It was a shock to all of us. I had never seen my father so defeated. He had always been strong, the rock of our family, but now he seemed smaller somehow, burdened by worries that I couldn't fully understand. Money became tight. My parents did their best to shield Emily and me from the reality of our situation, but it was hard not to notice the changes. We started having simpler meals, and there were no more little treats or toys like there used to be. My mother began mending our clothes instead of buying new ones, and she even took on some work herself, sewing for neighbors and baking goods to sell at the market. I tried to help where I could. After school, I'd run errands for the neighbors or do odd jobs around town to earn a little pocket money. I knew it wasn't much, but I wanted to do my part. Emily, being younger, didn't quite grasp the seriousness of our situation, and I was glad for that. She still sang and danced around the house, her laughter a small comfort in those difficult times. Despite the challenges, my father never gave up. He spent his days looking for work, taking any job he could find. Sometimes it was just small carpentry tasks or repairs, but he did them with the same dedication and skill as he always had. I admired him for that. Even when things were tough, he never lost his pride in his work. One day, my father came home with a smile on his face. He had found a job at a factory in a nearby town. It wasn't carpentry, but it was steady work, and it meant we could start to breathe a little easier. The job required him to work long hours, and he had to leave early in the morning and return late at night. I missed having him around, but I was glad to see some of the worry lift from his shoulders. Life slowly began to improve, but it was never quite the same as before. My father was often tired, and the sparkle in his eyes that I remembered from my childhood was dimmer. My mother continued to work hard, and I took on more responsibilities at home, helping out with chores and looking after Emily. We all had to grow up a little faster than we had expected. As I entered my teenage years, I began to think more seriously about my future. I knew that I couldn't rely on things going back to the way they were, and I didn't want to be a burden on my parents. I studied hard in school, determined to make something of myself. I still loved reading, and I found solace in books, especially those that told stories of people overcoming great challenges. They gave me hope that I could do the same. My father, though tired from his work at the factory, still found time to talk to me about my future. He encouraged me to follow my dreams, whatever they might be. But when I told him I wanted to be a carpenter like him, he hesitated. He told me that while he was proud of his trade, he wanted something better for me. He didn't want me to struggle like he had. I understood what he meant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that working with my hands, creating something tangible, was what I was meant to do. My father eventually gave in and began teaching me more about his craft. He showed me how to handle the tools, how to choose the right wood, and how to be patient, letting the work take its time. I cherished those moments, knowing that they were a gift. Around this time, Emily's dreams of becoming a singer grew stronger. She joined the school choir and started performing at local events. Her voice, once just a joyful sound in our home, was now something truly special. People began to notice her talent, and she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, her dream could come true. I was proud of her, but I also worried. I knew how hard life could be, and I didn't want her to be disappointed if things didn't work out. But Emily was determined, and her optimism was contagious. She believed in herself, and that gave me the courage to believe in myself too. As we grew older, the bond between Emily and me only grew stronger. We supported each other through the challenges we faced, and we both knew that no matter what happened, we would always have each other. Our parents had taught us the value of family, and that lesson stayed with us as we navigated the ups and downs of life. High school brought new challenges for me. The workload increased, and I found myself juggling school, part-time jobs, and my growing interest in carpentry. There were times when it all felt overwhelming, but I pushed through, knowing that my hard work would pay off in the end. I wanted to make my parents proud, to show them that their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Emily continued to shine, not just in singing but in everything she did. She was a bright light in our lives, and her success was a source of pride for our whole family. I sometimes wondered if I would ever find my own path, something that I could be as passionate about as she was about her music. But for now, I was content to work hard and see where life would take me. Then, just as things seemed to be settling into a routine, life threw us another curveball. My father's health began to decline. The long hours at the factory had taken a toll on him, and he started coming home more exhausted than ever. He tried to hide it from us, but it was clear that something was wrong. He began missing work, unable to keep up with the physical demands of the job. The doctors said it was a combination of stress and wear on his body from years of hard labor. They advised him to take it easy, but that was easier said than done. My father was the type of man who didn't know how to sit still. He had always been a worker, and the thought of not being able to provide for his family weighed heavily on him. We all did our best to support him during this time. My mother took on more work, and I picked up as many odd jobs as I could find. Emily even started singing at local events for a small fee, contributing what she could to help out. We were determined to get through this as a family, just as we had always done. But it wasn't easy. My father's pride was wounded, and I could see how much it hurt him to rely on us. He had always been the provider, the one who took care of everything, and now he felt helpless. I tried to reassure him, telling him that it was our turn to take care of him, just as he had taken care of us for so many years. But deep down, I knew he struggled with it. As the months passed, I watched as my father grew weaker. It was hard to see the man who had always been my hero become so frail. I wanted to fix everything to make things better, but I didn't know how. All I could do was be there for him, to help where I could, and to make sure he knew how much I loved and respected him. Despite everything, there were still moments of joy. Emily's singing continued to bring happiness into our lives, and my father would smile whenever he heard her practicing. He told her how proud he was of her, and I could see that her success brought him some peace. She was his shining star, and he took comfort in knowing that she was chasing her dreams. For me, those years were a time of growth and realization. I learned that life doesn't always go the way we plan, and that sometimes we have to face hardships we never expected. But I also learned that with love, determination, and the support of family, we could get through anything. It wasn't long before I had to make a decision about my future. High school was coming to an end, and I had to choose whether to pursue further education or start working full-time. My father, ever the realist, encouraged me to continue my education, to give myself the best chance at a better life. But I could see how much he wanted me to follow my passion, to become the carpenter I had always dreamed of being. In the end, I decided to do both. I found a trade school where I could study carpentry while working part-time. It wasn't an easy path, but it felt right. I knew I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to honor my father by becoming the best craftsman I could be. Emily, too, was making plans for her future. She had been offered a scholarship to a music school in the city, a chance to pursue her dream of becoming a professional singer. It was a big step for her, and for all of us. The thought of her leaving home was bittersweet. We were excited for her, but we would miss her terribly. As the time for her departure drew near, we spent as much time together as a family as we could. We knew that life was changing, that we were all heading in different directions, but we also knew that the bond we shared would always keep us connected. The day Emily left for the city was one of mixed emotions. We were all so proud of her, but saying goodbye was harder than I had expected. My father, though weak, made the trip to see her off, and I could see the pride in his eyes as he hugged her tightly. He told her to follow her dreams, to never give up, and to remember that we would always be there for her.